Hello, my name is Delilah Cordova, Visibility Creator here at Omnipresence Studios. We expose the world to our interviewees' unique products, services, and books, and we also help in their journey to go from undiscoverable to visible in a digital world. I am currently on a mission to conduct 100 author interviews, and we're talking about all things books, from publishing to new authors, and don't forget, marketing. I would like to welcome you to our show, Marketing and Coffee, where authors come to get inspired and experience. Hey authors, you finished your manuscript. What do you do next? If you would like to learn more about being featured on my show, go to marketingandcoffee.com. And without further ado, meet our next awesome author. All right. Hey, everybody. It's Delilah Cordova here, and I am here today in my office. We're doing things a little bit different. As you all know, we are now on WDRB Media, and we are starting to broadcast out of our in-studio office. So tomorrow we will be having 4 author interviews, 2 during the day, and then we're going to have a longer 1-hour show with 2 authors in the evening, and the 2 authors in the evening are going to be here in my studio, so I'm very excited for this. But today I am with Sosa, and she is a librarian. So for all you guys looking to ask questions for the librarian, she is in today. So Kenna, go ahead and tell them about your books and about your author life.
Great. Thank you very much for having me, Delilah. As you mentioned, yes, we're inside my beautiful library. I just did a library makeover this year, so it's nice and bright and shiny, which is exactly what I want to reflect in my writing. I've been a librarian for about 10 years now in the Dallas area, and I learned quite a bit about children's writing during that time. I started writing many years ago when I was growing up in San Antonio and doing travel pieces, but I discovered really that children's books are much more fun and passionate and exciting, and they embody everything, especially the creativity that I want to express. So I started about 2 years ago. My first book came out. This is Ray Antonio and Rafael. It's a bilingual picture book about Fiesta in San Antonio, which if you've ever been to San Antonio, you know April is 10 days of party down fun, and it's all about Fiesta. These are 2 main characters in Fiesta in San Antonio, lots of fun facts in the back, and a really fun sibling rivalry where they duke it out and they both want to be the king of the parade. It's a really great, fun bilingual book. Then May of this past year, my second book came out. It's a short chapter book, a middle grade chapter book called Kindertransport, A Child's Journey, which is about the Kindertransport. It's based off some interviews I did with Kindertransportees up at the University of Connecticut, and we recorded their stories and oral histories about their escape from Germany just before the outbreak of World War II on the train, which took them to England to live with foster families. And it is just a beautiful story of hope from the perspective of a child. And then most recently, in October, we have my newest book, The Unhuggables, which is just fantastic on so many levels. And I say that not being biased, but because it's really, truly what I believe. I was hanging out with my son one day, and he asked what would happen if you hug a porcupine. And I said, that would probably hurt. And then we were talking about how you don't want to hug just anyone or anything. You know, obviously you wouldn't hug a sea urchin. That would hurt. So we tossed some fun ideas back and forth, and then we talked about how sometimes people don't want to be hugged. And that's kind of what became the basis for the book. So you have a little boy named Oliver, and Oliver is upset one day, and he just doesn't want to be hugged. His mother, instead of forcing a hug on him or getting frustrated with him, plays with him and toys with him while he turns his feelings into all of these unhuggable Texas creatures, including a king snake, like the one I'm wearing on my neck, and a crocodile, which I bring along to all of my book signings to get the kids involved. And they go through the book. It's really, to be honest, I owe a lot of thanks and gratitude to my illustrator, Alexis Broad, for this book, because she just brings everything to life. I'll give you a little peek. So his feelings transform into the Texas creatures in an arc of action, and all the pages are just action-packed and fun and very involving in that way. And Mom she's just a great, loving, understanding mom, and she waits till he's ready for a hug again. So it's very sweet, it's kind, it deals with all kinds of profound things without being serious at all. It's quite fun, action-packed, and it's a wonderful bedtime story. The books, all three of them you can get through Barnes & Noble or Amazon. You can also get them directly through the publisher. The first two are from 4RV Publishing, and then the Unhuggables is through River Road Press out of New Orleans, or direct through me if you want a signed copy. Or if you're in the Dallas area, there are several indie stores that carry them as well.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Woo, you have a lot of books.
Thank you.
Yes. So with those books, how did it come about with getting them illustrated? Because every book has great illustration on it, from what I'm seeing. How does that work? How did that work for you? Is it the same illustrator? Or is it different illustrators?
No. Actually, all three of them have a different illustrator, and the illustrator, for children's books at least, predominantly is chosen by the publisher. So most of the time with most publishers, you don't really have a lot of say. You can tell them, I imagine this character to look like this, or it's very important to me that the character have these features, or, if it's about somebody who's short, that they be short. The illustrations have to match the text. But you don't have a lot of say when it comes to who is your illustrator. I feel very fortunate that I have three very different, very talented illustrators that worked on my books. The chapter book doesn't have a lot of illustrations, but I think the cover is just really fantastic and eye-catching, which to me looks like she did it with watercolor, and I'm not talented at all in that way, so I'm extra envious of her talent. What I would like to say about that, the Unhuggables illustrator, Alexis Broad, she does go out and help promote a lot, which is wonderful and not seen in every illustrator. But when we were in talks after editing with the publisher, he actually did give me some say, which is a rarity. So we looked at a few different styles, and then she would send us sketches, and then he would actually give me the chance to say, I kind of think the mom should be more vibrant and more fun, or I kind of think the animals should look a little bit less threatening, or whatever it was that we felt needed to be improved on in the illustration. We would actually get to give her input in that way. And she was warm and receptive and very gracious about it. And to be honest, I think she did a fabulous job. There's a website called Authors Talk About It, and the cover actually won for best cover when it was released in October, November of this year. So really, more than anything, I think you don't see a lot of covers that are white, just with a plain white background, because children's books, you want to grab their attention, and usually we do that with bold color. But she did such a wonderful job of making it look fun and exciting and, exhilarating to where you'd want to know what was going on with these animals, that we didn't even need a colorful background. We just needed her characters and my characters brought to life as one.
Right.
So very grateful for that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't know that, because I always hear from self-publishing children's authors. I didn't know exactly how that worked with the publisher, so that's interesting to know. That's interesting to know. So with your books, did you ever consider writing under a pseudonym?
I have considered it because I kind of feel like, as a creative person, I want to be a writer in all aspects. I want to be a well-rounded writer. So I do want to continue travel writing. I do want to continue children's writing. I do want to keep writing articles for CBS like I've been doing. I do want to ghostwrite and translate. And I also write short stories for adults. And that's where I've kind of considered maybe using a pseudonym, because you have to have your public persona as an author and then your private persona. And especially working in education, I think it's very important that we follow certain guidelines on our public persona as well. And I wouldn't want to blur the lines there. So I have considered it, but I haven't really made a determination, because I think if I'm going to use a pen name, it needs to be really, really cool. So right now it's the process of finding one and sticking to it, and developing a persona that goes along with that pseudonym.
Nice. That's beautiful. I wanted to point out we got a couple of people watching. We have Priscilla McGee and George Simwa. So George, hey, thanks. I hope I didn't mess up your name, but thank you for watching. If you have any questions, make sure you guys do ask them. And if you are now watching the replay, make sure you hashtag replay and hashtag support your authors. Okay. So yeah, we're gonna continue on. So what was an early experience where you learned that language had power?
Well, I think we've all heard the pen is mightier than the sword, and words, once they're on paper, are permanent. So I learned, in an early age, just that I loved words, and I loved to write, and I loved to write notes, and I loved to learn languages. And, passing notes around in school, that was always a big deal. That was almost more valid than saying something to someone in person. So that would be one of the first times I realized that. But I've always been very quiet and very shy. I was a typical little book nerd in school, and I didn't like to express myself in ways that people may or may not have agreed with and just be bold and go for it. Now I can do that, but at the time, that would put me into an anxiety attack. I just couldn't do it. But in English class, sophomore year in high school, we were told to free write for 5 minutes, where you just get a pen and paper and they time it, and you're not looking for spelling, grammar, you're not looking for a certain type of composition. You're just spilling whatever's coming out of your soul onto the paper. And I shocked even myself, because I spent the entire 5 minutes with my hand just moving nonstop to where I wasn't even sure where it was going anymore. And then we had to switch with someone, and that person would read it. And then a few people said that they wanted to present the writing of the person they had switched with. And so mine was read, and I think, the eyes popped open, and wow, this really quiet person has a lot to say, which was an eye-opener for me, because I really didn't think it would be that surprising. Of course, I have a million thoughts going on in my head all the time. I just don't voice them all.
Right.
And so every time we did that assignment, it was so revealing. All the things that I had internalized that I didn't even realize were in there, and I didn't even realize that I wanted to speak and get out there, and that was kind of the genesis of it for me.
That's awesome. It's like kind of like your prelude to librarian, right? Like did you foresee yourself becoming a librarian? Is that what you wanted to do when you were growing up? Or
No, I still say I don't know what I want to do when I grow up, because I like to do a lot of things. If I had a clone, I would want to be an anthropologist. So it's all over the place. I always liked reading and writing, so I think that was always in me. I just didn't know where exactly it would go.
Right. Awesomeness. So you have a lot of books. So how many unpublished and half-finished books do you have?
Oh, I'm not even sure at this point. I have a lot of short stories that I've written for adults, as I've mentioned, that I haven't really submitted. I send them to friends all the time, and we enjoy them. And I've thought about making an anthology, but I'm still kind of working on how exactly I would put that out there, and in what format. As far as children's books go, there were several that I had written building up to this point. Because you write a lot of things early on, and then now if I go back and look at them, I say, well, I'm glad I didn't submit that anywhere. How embarrassing, because I've learned a lot about the industry over the years, and the writing style and things like, the child should always be the hero in your story of 4 children. You don't want the adult saving the day. That takes the power from the child, and you want the kids to feel empowered and identify with the characters in your story. So there are things like that I learned along the way, that I understand now why certain pieces didn't get published. While they were good for writing exercise and they really helped me develop, they weren't quite at the level that I needed them to be just yet. Right now, I have 2 that I've written recently that I'm trying to see what to do with them. Publishers' contracts are very different, publisher to publisher. My publisher for the Unhuggables happens to have a first looks contract, meaning whatever I write next, I need to give him first the option of contracting it. And if he chooses not to take it, I can shop it around to other publishers. But it is written in my contract I have to go through him first. So I'm already in in the stage of basically waiting to see if he's going to accept that next story, and then it will be through River Road Press, or if it's going to be shopped around elsewhere. So that's about where I'm at with it. But I feel like a change has happened after the Unhuggables, and all the things that I love about writing and expressing myself are definitely in the Unhuggables, and I want to stick with things that are heartfelt and profound, but totally unpredictable and wild, and that's kind of where I want to go with the next story.
So would you ever consider self-publishing your works? Ever?
You know, there are pros and cons to self-publishing. It used to have a lot of a stigma that has kind of withered away in the past several years, which is a good thing. It opens the doors to a lot of people who wouldn't otherwise have access to the industry, because like any industry, like Hollywood, you know, if you know somebody, it's easier to get in the door than it is if you don't, but you're really talented. Right. So, you know, it definitely opens the door. And perks, for example, you keep all your rights self-publishing. You know, I can't exactly turn around and create an ebook from my books without publisher permission. I can't turn around and create a teacher's guide without publisher's permission. I can't merchandise without my publisher's permission. So those are all things that I definitely see as a benefit of having of self-publishing. I think you kind of keep more of the profits as well based on what you invest. So if I had a project that I really felt like I wanted to be mine and only mine, I would consider it. I've always dreamt of illustrating my own story. So that may be where I jump in and decide to do it myself if I really want to take ownership of the entire process. For right now, I'm very comfortable where I'm at learning from the publishers, so that when I finally decide this is something I want to do, I know enough to do it well. Because the best self-published books are the ones you look at and you have no idea they're self-published. They're just that good. And that's what you want when you self-publish.
Right. That's so interesting to hear your perspective on, because a lot of people are like so into self-publishing, but to hear your perspective on actually going with a publisher. And, you know, like I didn't know you can do all those different things either. So I'm learning today. Wow. So what kind of research do you do, and how long do you spend researching before beginning a book?
It really depends on the subject matter. For the Unhuggables, the only research I actually did was to pick animals that were native to where I'm from, which actually was not the original plan. I had 5 completely different animals in the beginning that could have been found anywhere, basically. And then I also had a different title. It was 5 animals you wouldn't want to hug. But the publisher decided to make it regional, and so I had to go back and say, okay, what would be 5 unhuggable animals from my region? So as far as research goes, that was really the only research I did, is which animals could I use that would fit this profile? What would their behavior be like? What would they look like? Would they fit this book?
Yes.
Kindertransport, however, I did a lot of research. I actually was awarded the Billy J. Levy Travel and Research Grant with my proposal, and I traveled to the University of Connecticut to study at the Dodd Research Center. Wow. I wanted to read a lot about the Kindertransport, just as much as I could soak in. And I was very blessed because I had no idea that they actually had connections to real Kindertransportees, people that were on the trains. Right. So that was a surprise once I got there, and we went through the entire process. We documented the oral histories. They're actually available to listen to on the website for the Dodd Research Center. And I really just had to make sure I had my facts straight. The Unhuggables does not, but the first 2 books do have a fact file in the back listing some facts for kids that want to know more, if that's the springboard for them learning more about the subject. And the San Antonio book, I mean, I grew up there, so a lot of it is my experience as a child. Fiesta was always really, really special. But I did go to the website and I researched facts about, you know, how many people come in every year for that festivity, and a lot of things that were directly related to the celebration instead of just the story.
I want to take us back a little bit to Kindertransport, because that one, it seems like an epic book. What is the historical timeline for that? When did that start happening? And then how old were the Kindertransportees?
The actual children, Basically what it was a program developed by some humanitarian, just regular everyday people who saw a need to help these children because the war hadn't quite broke out yet. So we weren't officially in World War II. We're talking 1930s Germany and Europe. And so they got together and they noticed that people were starting to be mistreated, losing their businesses, and there was the beginnings of chaos was there. And so these people, they were totally unrelated. They weren't Jewish people themselves. They were just people who saw a need and decided that they needed to do something to help. So they made arrangements with the government to give these children permission to leave the country. They actually had to have permission to leave, and the families would apply for a spot on the train. They would apply for permission, and then they would be boarded onto the train, and it was only children. So, I mean, you had children as young as toddlers all the way up to early teenagers that were being put on these trains and sent away from their families to go live with foster families, and they weren't allowed to bring anyone, mom, dad, anyone. It was children only, because they were the only ones the government would allow to leave. And thank goodness they did, because they saved hundreds of people that way. And then, of course, when war actually broke out, the government stopped giving them permission to do this, so they were no longer allowed to get more children out.
Wow. Could you imagine sending your children on a train to who knows where just to get some, and I wonder, like, I got to read the book now because I didn't even know what happened to people on the train or what kind of, because you don't know, like, you put your children on a train, especially like your little girls and stuff like that. Like, what happened along the way? What adverse events happened?
And that's why I was so glad that I got to interview people who were actually on the train, because I think the subject matter is pretty deep. So I had some trouble selling that one around because people automatically thought, are you crazy? You're talking about the Holocaust with children. Well, actually, I'm not. I'm talking about the children who were able to leave on the train, and I got it from their perspective. So, a child at that time and age is not going to necessarily have the hindsight and the knowledge of, oh, these are really awful people. Oh, I may not have a family to come back to. They're experiencing it through the eyes of a child who's probably more worried about, I'm so sad to leave my mom and dad, than all the rest of the chaos that's going on. And they're noticing, ooh, this is different bread than I've ever had, and this is a different smell. And, they weren't allowed to take very many items with them. So as a child, what would you choose to take? So these were all things that I wanted to delve into from the perspective of a child. As an adult, I would say I would take this, this, and this. These are necessities. Right. As a child, I might take my bunny because that's really special to me and it makes me feel safe. So I got those details from them to make sure that the character, her name is Helen, she's named after my grandmother, but she is a fictional character who has the experiences of the people that I interviewed.
So were they were they ever reunited with their families after the war?
Yes and no. A lot of them were not. The three people that I interviewed were very, very fortunate that, yes, they did have family members to go back to, and they're very grateful for that. That may be perhaps why they still felt like it was a hopeful thing that they were grateful to be part of. But out of the hundreds that left, there were many who either barely had family left or some that had none at all. So some of them stayed in England with the foster families. Some of them emigrated to the United States and elsewhere to find more opportunities. Some of them stayed there and lived in orphanages. And so if I had the chance to interview even more, I'm sure there would be some other stories that were probably more tragic than what they experienced themselves. Some of them, for example, like my story ends when they get to England, so it doesn't tell what happens with the foster families. Right. But like anyone in a foster situation, you have some who have a warm, loving family they're welcomed into as one of their own, and then there are some who, are treated as their extra, and then there were some who actually foster families fell through, and so they were sent to mostly boys' homes on the Isle of Man. So their stories, I'm sure, vary greatly, but I can only really base it off the ones that I had to share.
Wow, that's so crazy. I I gotta read it now. You said it's for kids, but Delilah's gonna be in there. Like,
It's that sounds fine.
wow. So, what period of your life do you find you write about most often?
Well, that is a tough one because I know everybody thinks that most of the time when we write from an autobiographical perspective, but I don't think I really do. I do tend to write about a certain age group, which is probably around the age that my sons are at right now. They're 8 and 10. So anywhere from about 6 to 10 years old, mostly because as they approach middle school, I become terrified of them. So that's about where my attention span cutoff is when it comes to writing. But that's a great age. I started about 17 years ago in the school district as a kindergarten teacher. And I just love that age because they're happy and sweet and they want to please and they say the funniest, most out there outlandish things. And so I've just always thought that that was a magical time when your mind is completely open to anything. You can ask a 5-year-old, what do you want to be when you grow up? And one might say a doctor and one might say, I want to be a lion. And I love that about that age.
Yeah.
Because they still haven't figured out that there are limits and dreams that may or may not come true. And I like to write from the perspective of this is another world and anything can happen in this world. Plus, as a mom of 2 little boys, I think that's kind of mentally where I'm stuck right now is, I'm with kids all day at work and then I'm with kids at home and you kind of stay in that mindset when that's what you're around.
That's awesome. So earlier you said that you chose your mother's name, Helen, for one of your characters, but how do you select the names of your characters?
That's a great question. My grandmother's name was Helen, and so I chose that for her just because I've always thought it was a beautiful name. She passed, oh gosh, more than 20 years ago now. So I kind of wanted to, I don't know, I guess honor her in that way, using her name. Because I'm named after my grandfather, so it's kind of not fair anyway. So I figured I owed her that much. But so that's where Helen's name came from, and it matched. It did go along with the culture coming from Germany, so it was one I could use that I felt something for. For Ray Antonio and Rafael, well, Antonio's from San Antonio, so that worked. And then Ray means king, which went along with the theme of the story. For the Unhuggables, actually, I had a different name picked out originally. The little boy's name was Matthias, just because I think it's a really interesting name, and you don't hear it very often.
Right.
However, as many things go when you send it to the publisher, that was one of the things that they suggested we change. They said they weren't sure how to pronounce it, or that just anybody reading it would know how to pronounce it, or, it was just a little bit too different. So what could we use? And they came up with some alternatives, and I said, okay, well, how about Oliver? My grandfather's name was Oliver. I like the name. It's a name that's really catching speed right now, so they thought it was great, and that became his name from there.
Nice. At least, they could have done like one of those crazy newer names like Mercedes or, Lexus. No. So what is your favorite childhood book?
Oh, there was one. I have 2 actually, but one is less profound than the other. Christina, Katerina, and the Box. And I forget the author's name off the top of my head. I'm very sorry. I should have known that. But that book was special to me for so many reasons. It's about a girl who gets this great big refrigerator box. So it's just huge. And through the story, she transforms it into a castle. And then when that gets messed up, she transforms it into something else. And so she just keeps on reusing and recreating and reimagining use for this box until there's pretty much nothing left of it. So it's symbolic, but that was something I liked to do. My best friend growing up, Krista, we would do things like that. We would get boxes and make it into a spaceship, and we turned a pizza box into a transporter. And, we would just get markers and crayons and scissors, and we would create this whole world using boxes. So it just completely went along with what kind of little girl I was. even the Barbies that we had, we spent the time making furniture for them instead of really playing with them. So it was more me than a lot of other things that I saw that were out there for girls. So I just loved that book, and I found a copy at Half Price Books a couple years back, and I just burst into tears because I don't think it's a book that's very well known. So to find a copy this many years later was just incredibly heartfelt for me. I really, really loved it. It's in my closet now. It's protected.
Nice.
There was that one, and then there was the monster at the end of this book, and it's got Grover from Sesame Street. And so he's telling you the whole time not to turn the page because there's a monster at the end of the book, and he's doing everything to distract you as you're reading it, including building a wall of bricks so that you don't get to the monster at the end of the book. And then finally, you don't listen to him screaming and wailing about not doing it. You turn the page and it's him. So it's not after all, which I just always thought was really funny.
Grover's always been funny. Yeah. So then I really like how you brought up with the book, the box, because it reminds me too, like when I was a kid, we used to take milk crates and make Barbie houses and make little furniture. Like, that was the funnest thing ever. Like you don't see kids doing that nowadays. And my daughter cuts up a box every once in a while, but it just becomes a big mess.
Yeah.
Nothing imaginative about that. So what is the most difficult part of your artistic process?
Ooh, I think, like most writers, I hate editing. Editing is so terrible. I know it's necessary. It's a necessary evil, but I don't know that anybody truly likes it. As I like to say, the idea itself for a story, whether it's children's or adults, is kind of like your baby. You spend all this time crafting it in your head and imagining it and swimming in it in your thoughts. And then when you get it on paper, it's like, oh, my baby's finally here. I'm so happy. Well, you don't turn around and then take your baby and say, no, actually, I think you need to have a little bit more hair here, my dear child that I love so much, or you need to do this and let me fix you, which is what we do with the story. So I really hate editing, but I admit, like I said, after writing this many years, going back and looking at stuff that I wrote many, many years ago, I say, wow, definitely wish I knew these little tricks then, because maybe I could have done something with that story at that point. But you live and you learn. It's like turning in your paper to the teacher and it comes back all marked up. And at first it really hurts your feelings. But then if you take a mature perspective of it and look and say, oh, they're just trying to help me make it better, then it makes sense. Like the Unhuggables, yeah, that was my baby. I didn't want to change the title and his name and the animals and what are you doing to my baby? But now when I look at it, once I accept it, I say, okay, yes, I can definitely see why we should have changed the title. And yes, it makes more sense to me now. All they were trying to do was to make it a better book. And that's all you're trying to do when you edit is, even though it's not your original word or feeling or original thought, it's what's necessary to make it better. Just like us as people, of course, none of us want heartbreak, but we take it, we learn from it, and we grow and we become better.
Right.
So it's a hard knock, but.
My question to you is, how did working with the publisher help you? Did it help you? Do you think it helped you to sell more books, or how did that work? Like, as far as marketing with your publisher?
Marketing. I have to say, marketing was the thing that really threw me for a loop when I got started because, until you get into it, I think we all have the illusion that your publisher's out there just gung-ho selling them for you and they're flying off the shelves and, you already did your part and then you sit back and you collect your pretty paycheck. And that's not what it is at all. The industry has changed a lot over the years because now you're competing with self-published books, you're competing with ebooks, you're competing with TV and YouTube for a child's attention. And on top of that, prices go up. So, back in the day, if you were buying a book for your child at $5, $10, it's much different than buying one at nearly $20 now. So it's part of your responsibility now as an author to get out there and sell. And that could be definitely maintaining an online presence and posting and trying to get the word out there to showing up in person and trying to sell your books. In the fall, when the Unhuggables came out, every single weekend I was somewhere. Every single weekend I was at a store. It could have been Barnes and Nobles. It could have been an indie bookstore that's local to Dallas. It could have been a festival. Anywhere they would take me and let me show up and sell books, I would show up and sell books and talk to strangers, which, if you knew me when I was a kid, I would have been absolutely terrified of that. There are times even, as a mom, I've had to take my kids with me and say, I'm sorry, I got to go sell books. You're my assistants for the day. I went everywhere they would allow me to go and tried to get the word out as much as possible. And I had no idea coming into this that was going to be part of the duties, but it really truly is, because you also are proving to your publisher, I'm willing to do what it takes to make sure this book is successful. Depending on who your publisher is, I mean, if you're at Random House, I'm not sure, they may set you up on an author tour, they may not, but all the authors that I've talked to say basically that this is part of the job. You show up at TLA. I was there in April. It's a Texas Library Association, and we do a huge conference every year. So I was there in April presenting and selling books, and anywhere you can get the word out to, because you never know who's going to know somebody else that maybe might get you on that radio show, or maybe might help write an article or publish an interview that you've done to continue to get the word out there. Even my mom, I'm shy. Every time I see my mom, she's like, oh, so-and-so wants a book, and so wants a book. I'm like, good grief, Mom, I need to start giving you a commission or something, because it's almost like she's doing just as much as I am to get the word out there. But it really is part of it. And for somebody who's shy, I prefer to kind of be behind the screen and write those words on paper. And I can write really loud and boisterous and in your face on paper. And then in person, I'm nervous and I'm scared. So that's been a huge challenge, but it is so necessary as an author to get your name out there. Most of the authors that I've spoken with have actually said, if you're going to do it full time, most of your income is going to come from school visits and public speaking, not necessarily from sales. So whereas in the past you could have made your living off of book sales and done some promotion locally, now it's part of your job to get out there and be everywhere you can be and be a public persona. So that's been a real learning experience for me.
Right. So true. So true. You have to do more legwork than what you think, and especially I like how you brought up, because I'm all about digital marketing. You got to build your online presence and become a public figure if you want to make those sales. You got to be really strategic in how you're going to do your marketing, and starting with social media is the best way to go right now, because that's where everybody's at. But it's also about using your social media strategically. Like I always mention, I want to mention again, if you guys are not using LinkedIn, make sure you're getting on LinkedIn so that you can connect business to business with publishers, journalists, radio show hosts, etc. Over on LinkedIn. Especially if you're like, you can even connect with people in Scholastic. You can find them on LinkedIn based on business, and it gives you a platform where it's about business, less about personal Facebook stuff. You know what I mean? So
yeah, definitely
get on your LinkedIn's, guys. Yeah, we got a lot of people. They like you today. We got John Boltman. Hey, John. And we have Jim Vogel. He says hello from California. How you doing? We got Darlene M. Ramirez. I hope I said that right. Darlene. She says hello from Florida. And then John Boltman says, that must be tough, as that seems to go against your nature.
Very much so.
Yeah.
But Beyonce has a stage persona. So I figure if even Beyonce gets scared and has to rely on her alter ego, then I can do this too.
It's also fierce, right?
Yes, you knew.
I know my Beyonce. So yeah, my last question for you for today is, what is one piece of advice that you could give to other authors that they could take right now and just
Oh, wow. Wow, that's a tough one to narrow it down to one. I would say do your research. Well, no, let me rephrase that too. Do your research and remember it's a labor of love. Um, that's all connected in a way, but write because you love it, not because your only goal is to get your word out there. Because it may or may not happen. I'm very fortunate, I'm very lucky that I was able to get my foot in the door and get somewhere. And if The Unhuggables is my last book, so be it. I'm still proud of that, and I will never stop writing regardless. If you don't love what you're doing, you won't be willing to really do the labor part. And the labor, of course, is that editing that I don't like, the speaking that I'm fine and I'm proud of myself afterwards for doing it, but it is hard for me to do, to get the courage to do. And the research part. By that I mean really looking and doing your homework ahead of time, making sure you're submitting to a publisher who's actually accepting submissions, you're following those submission guidelines, because although all of our ideas are brilliant, if you're not going along with what they're asking for you to do, that's seen as uncooperative, and then you're less likely to be given a chance. So write because you love to, and then remember that that labor part is necessary to bring your work to life.
Right, right. And in conclusion with this, can you remind them again of where they can get your books and how they can find you and connect with you, all that stuff, that good stuff?
Yes. Of course, the first two, sorry, I got too close to you for a minute there. Kindertransport and Ray Antonio Raphael are from 4RV Publishing, so you can get them directly from the publisher, 4RV, or Barnes & Noble online has them, and Amazon also. I have a Facebook author page, and I do respond to messages, so if anyone wants to purchase one directly through me and have me sign it, then I do that as well. I don't have a problem with that at all. And then the Unhuggables is, it's Barnes & Noble online now, Amazon. If you're doing it through Amazon, make sure it's me so I can sign it. If you get it from somewhere else, they won't sign it for you, but make sure it's me. And then also it's available through the publisher, which is River Road Press out of New Orleans, so make sure it's River Road Publishing. And then also, if you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, I have copies at several local stores, including in Terabang Books. Oh gosh, why am I going blank? Lucky Dog Books, Monkey and Dog Books in Fort Worth. A lot of local places. You can just call around, or again, send me a Facebook message at Sosa Author is my Facebook page, and I'll be more than happy to get a signed copy out to you as well.
Beautiful. Awesomeness. You guys, thank you all for everybody who has shown up and shown out. We had a lot of viewers this episode, and I'm so excited for that. We will be back tomorrow with, like I said, the 4 author interviews and the in studio, which we're going to be setting up here soon. If once again, if you guys are just now watching the replay, make sure you hashtag replay, catch up with Kenna, and yeah, we will see you next time. Hashtag support your author by leaving reviews. You can visit this author's book at the link above. Make sure to subscribe and ring the bell to receive our notifications.